stakeholders and make sure that this channel of revenue, the estimated $72 million, was going to be used to build factories, monumental projects, so that, yes, by the time the mine is off, we can see some direct benefits we got from the mine. Unlike the practice where, the existing practice where they do mining companies in certain areas, the mine collapses, and you don't see anything monumental to justify maybe why that environmental degradation and other things came about. So that is one key item on the agenda. And our recommendation is that money should not be paid into the consolidated fund like the royalties. We must have a local fund where that 1% community fund will be paid into it. And that will facilitate our agenda for the construction of factories and all whatnot. Well, in practice, I'm very much aware when some of these monies come out, the chiefs, other interested community people, as in royalties, they get something. But with this community development fund, it's not part of the revenues where chiefs and other interested parties are going to get anything. We the chiefs, the existing regulations are that chiefs will get whatever they want from the royalties. So apart from the royalty as an income stream, in which a percentage, I think 25% is paid to the administrator of stool land, then some will be sent back to the assembly. It's grossed up to 100% again, then various distributions are made. Yes, so we are very comfortable with that arrangement. But our position is that we are going to have our environment changed. And by the time, the 12 years time, the mine is totally, the ore depletes. We should make sure that, and the mine closes down, we have to make sure that we have something monumental to tell the future generation that, yes, this is what we got after losing our lithium and the surface of the land. The next thing, which is of national interest, is that we are also aware the royalty to be paid has increased from the regular 5% or so to about 10%, yes. Then also the carrying interest for the government is also going to be 13%. So all these percentage depict that there is a big improvement in the existing rates paid by various mining companies, existing mining companies within the system. One problem we are having now as chiefs, is that we have this mining law, the Mining Act 703, and the resettlement and compensation law. All these laws have provisions which makes it mandatory that once the mining company declares an active mining area, all economic activities cease. And this declaration was made in December 2023. So just imagine, no farming, no building, nothing. Everything has ceased. So that is why it's one of our major concerns. And in fact, we heard that until this process is finished, still our people are going to suffer. Our message is, yes, we don't want to force Parliament to do what is not expected of them. But if we think we are not going to agree to the project, let's know, and the farmers and the community, the project affected community, their land is released to them so that they can continue with their economic activities. Just imagine, since December 2023, no farming, nothing, no economic activity, that the people will be using the land which has been declared as the active mining area. So it's of very much concern to us that let's make up our mind, yes. But also maybe based on this, what I will want Parliament now to, we all take note of is, if we can now let the potential mining companies know that until this process is completed, maybe they should not declare the active mining area. What about assuming you don't approve? Can they pay the losses that they've caused these communities? It's an area, I think, of much concern, which I will want all of us to look at. Well, so on this note, I want to end, and maybe if my colleagues have one or two items to add, they do that before we hand over the boot.
Thank you very much, Nana. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
But it should be very brief.
Very brief. Just make it detailed and numeric. About total of about 500 structures which are supposed to be completed are halted as a result of the proposed mining. About 1,200 farmers are being deprived from farming on their land to make ends meet. Petitioning the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nana. I think we have to move straight to Nyinahini so that we'll finish with Nananom. So, Nyinahini, let's listen to you.
Mr. Chair, honorable members, Nananom, and all protocols observed. Mr. Chair, with much respect, I will seek for your indulgence to permit me to speak in a language that I'm well vested in. That is the local dialect. Mr. Chair, the fact is not that I cannot speak English, but I want the good people of Achumamponua, Nyinahini, and Enchancy Krom, to be precise, to listen to me, because I'm told that we are on air, and so I know they are listening to whatever being said over here. So if Mr. Chair will permit me, I don't want the situation where they will say that Nakwe Wankare. Yeah. Nemum kakra yeru amedri ye make can say community engagement no de sabi ye ni giadek e share several times ho. O my peasant farmers enti ama Oma resorted to other drugs. Nkray sorry asebi tramol, hypertension, any home chronoba. Ese womo. Na we muso na ye sebi the labor force of Ghana. Esa abreya ahode ne wo ho no. Yetibi nya enipa free wo mumu. Enso se ni nyina go waste. Na dia ya na opinion catcher ne say ye dia beda parliament. Enokre ye nim say Ghana ha de parliament eyemra shebedwa. Omo na omo shemra ema oman no. Enu nti emfa emranche yensem se nam se pese aban betu bauxite nti na ya ye nuoma troka. Enu nti the petition the parliamentary committee lands and natural resources se madaroma una mujina ye speaker enim mona moka bi ewom enu nti na Ghana man sebi ye to aba ede mo baaye se momra man ye nhihye pa ebebo oman no nhihye ya sebi ebru sebi eson ede nnwuma mpuntuo ebebre oman Ghana na Ghana mambru ebenya adwuma ye adwuma ne bi ni ho den nei se bauxite aba na yese ye passe law no eye lease bauxite lease no na yetimi hye adwuma nase na mabunya adwuma ya sebi ye besremo madaroma yensa adwuma yin hye we enye political party asem sebi ebru sebi eson manusi boni ananan mpanimfo chema momfa ncheme madaroma ye meye NDC asem ene meye MPP asem ni mom ye nhwe o man Ghana kane Ghana first Ghana ne beboa ama maburu na nya adwuma ye enu nti ne de maba se mo nhwe ne mra no eba madaroma mototo ma adwene ntem na mapase na timama enwuma pa aba man mu enti ye de ye nya ne tintipi ye sremo me kai se ye wo mi amisua me gina class 5 6 me ti nyina hi bauxite wansem me nyina befudwene ebesi samre ye ntimi to bauxite mu empanifo eba ye nyina ruko still ye ntimi to bauxite no enti enede se yenya se bi platform kese na ye dum panifo anima ye besere Mr. Chair, honorable members madaroma mumani new speaker anim na mohwe na bauxite lease no mompasse my na project ni ntimi hyase ye damase
for yenyina sempa nana yedase we thank you very much for the presentation with the oma and normal short amay me call TV3 omo frame program me call ye and omo say parliament leases now ban yenye rubber stamp ana yenhwe me be ne stamp na me se debi yenye rubber stamp mpanyimfo a wo mu kabie wo mu nyina ye be frɛ wo mu no mabayanim no bia be kire na dwen be ne nyame boa ne se ye ne mo kasa wie na mo free ha we promise you say kwan bia be fa so aye de be plenary ama ya discuss wo na mo nya approval no ye be ye ntimetima show sabo no Nana, we beg you, there are other institutions here who will be doing presentation. Even though you have delayed, we crave your indulgence to wait and listen to these presentations so that you understand where they are also coming from. We beg you. Please give us some short period. So we'll call the other presenters, and after they finish, then we throw our questions to them. So let's call Aye, please do your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we have already submitted a memo to the Speaker as of 19th July, indicating our position on the lithium lease. So I'll just give the excerpts, of the memo that we submitted to the Speaker. First, we see the lease, the lithium lease as the concession royalty tax type of lease. And we do not think that that type of lease is in the interest of the country. I mean, to the extent that it doesn't give us enough. We have a lot more resources than Dubai. Look at Obuasi compared with Johannesburg. Why this vast difference? And this is because we have not been able to take ownership of our natural resource wealth, which is worth trillions of dollars. We need to resource the Ghana Geological Survey department such that it can map out our mineral resources. Because the excuse we normally give is that, we don't have the capital to explore the resources. We don't even probably know where exactly the resources are. That's why we have to rely on foreigners. And because of that, we let them take away almost the entire, product. So we should continually, resource the Ghana Geological Survey Department so that it can map out our mineral resources. Then we also need to train Ghanaian engineers in mineral exploration and production so that they can take over from these foreign companies. As I said, we are sitting on trillions of dollars of natural resource wealth that we should leverage to develop this country. Never again should we run to Western capitals and now and then to beg for aid. We don't need the IMF's $3 billion over 3 years with all those conditionalities. We have the resources here. So we are urging, Parliament, to look at this lease and not pass it in its current form because it is the same concession colonial type of lease. We are told that royalty is it 15% or is it 10%? And then other, tax rates and so on. And we are being told that this is the best that we have ever had. But you see, if you have something that is better than a previous, benefit, it doesn't mean that it's good enough. So even though we are being told that it is the best that we have ever had, it is still not good enough. So we are urging Parliament, to pass a different type of contract, a lease, that is product sharing and not concession type of contract. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You wait for your questions. We move to Imani, Ghana.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members, Nananom. Chairman, please, we sent a presentation, so I don't know if they are going to project it or I should speak directly from here.
Please speak direct.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for the opportunity. So, for us at Imani, our concerns about the agreement in its present state is driven primarily because of the way the lithium market operates. And so we believe that whatever goes into the final agreement must take cognizance of the dynamics within the market so that we are able to protect the stake of the government or the share that comes to the government and the people within the affected communities. And so we are aware that there have been steps to improve the fiscal regime from what is already existing in the legislation. While those are commendable, we also believe that there are other aspects of the lithium market that needs to be considered before preparing the final agreement. And so in just a minute, I'll just lay a brief background of where we are coming from. We do believe that going into the future, as the transition takes momentum, lithium is going to be one of the key critical minerals. But the way lithium is not like gold that the value is inherent. And so when you mine the gold from the ground, it's already to some extent a valuable resource. But in the case, the next layer, that is the processing. And if you look at the market, averagely, the spodumene concentrate share in the value added sometimes averages around 10%. So for example, if the lithium hydroxide value is, let's say, $1,000, the share of the raw spodumene you pick from the ground averagely in the market is sometimes around 10%. And so if you don't put in measures in your agreement, that makes the processing the main focus of what you are doing. It means you are not capturing enough value. And when the hydroxide goes into the battery value chain and you do processing, you're able to capture at least about 30% of the battery technology. And so that is why we are pushing that the focus of the agreement should really look at the beneficiation, that is the local value addition, and not the raw spodumene that will be mined. Another interesting thing that we want the committee and parliament to also critically look at is that the pricing of lithium is very volatile, highly unstable, and we pick two endpoints. If you look at between 2022 November and 2023 September, we see that the price declined from about $80,000 to about $16,000. That is the lithium hydroxide. Presently, as we speak, just in the month of August, the price of the spodumene concentrate has declined sharply from around 800 to 700, and that the prices are not so stable and predictable like metals such as gold. And so anything that you put in your agreement should be cognizant of the high volatility of the pricing. One of the factors driving that volatility too is because if you take the economics of lithium, the price is also determined or driven by inventory in high producing countries like China and Australia. The more inventory is piled on the global markets, the prices also decline. Another thing is that if you take the lithium, it has to be matched with other critical metals to produce the battery technology. So the economics of the people buying the lithium is not only based on lithium, but how the economics of other metals are also going. And these are some of the factors that really drive the price. And so what you put in your agreement is to have a price batteries available for recycling in terms of market value has increased from $3 billion to almost $20 billion. And so because there is a rise in the push for circular economy in advanced economies that use a lot of these clean energy technologies, there is a tendency that if the recycling market for lithium-based batteries is stabilized and it keeps growing, the demand for raw lithium is going to be affected. Therefore, the prices may decline. So what are the measures and mechanisms we put into the agreement that shield us from such market dynamics? Now, when we come to the key terms of the agreement, we recognize that the fiscal terms are different from what we have seen over the years. For example, the royalty and the carried interest. But what we want to draw Parliament's attention to is that if you take the royalty and some of the other levies, it is based on the sales revenue, which means that how much you sold or how much spodumene concentrate or hydroxide that you sold, that's how we calculate the royalties. And so when the royalties is calculated and the price drops, it means that you get a very low amount of money or the expected royalties will not be achieved. Another factor that you also want to draw Parliament's attention to is that because there is not a price benchmarking within the existing agreement, we don't know which price benchmarking mechanism will be used to sell the lithium. And across the world, one of the popular markets is the Shanghai exchange market for lithium. And the Indians also typically will use an independent assessment to develop a price benchmarking. But in our current agreement, we didn't see any price benchmarking mechanism. So what we are asking is that, what will be the benchmark for selling the lithium? Another point that you also want to draw, you have seen globally. If this is the economics of the project, then it means that government has a lot of room to push for more. And that is what we are pushing, that we shouldn't put in measures that will restrict our ability to ask for more, and that there are opportunities to ask for more. Our friends from NRGI did a very interesting study, and I'm sure my friend Dennis will talk about it. When they look at the economics of the mine, and they look at what we call the average effective tax rate, which is, if you look at the whole mining operation, how much of revenue will come to the government, if you compare us to countries, mature countries like Mali, DRC, Zimbabwe, our average effective tax rate is higher than already before the mine even starts. 50% of the mine output has already been sold to a partner financing the development. How then do we solve all of these complexities that comes with the agreement? Another challenge is that we see that there is state participation in it. MEF is investing about $27.9 million to get equity stake of about 6%. Then they are also buying about 3.09% of the main parent company. But the risk of dilution is what we want the committee to also pay attention. Dilution is that this Atlantic Lithium company is a minor when it comes to mining industry, is a junior. And so they will keep seeking capital from the international market. As they bring on board more owners into the company, those who hold shares within the Ghana portfolio, the amount of shares that you hold is at risk of dilution. And so there are, in terms of legal and financial techniques, we should explore non-dilution clauses that will help us so that our shares are non-dilutable and we don't lose the value of what we expect to get from the paid state participation that we are looking for. Another thing that we've seen in the mining industry is the use of real options. Real options means that you are able to build some flexibilities within the agreement, which means that if the pricing gets to this level and the mine is not profitable, there's an opportunity to opt for another maybe conditions. For example, either you opt to sell, you opt out, or you opt to halt the operations. And so in financing, we call it real option clauses. And real option clauses, typically they use the net present value to do all of those modeling. What we want to ask is that whether those kind of modeling have been done so that in future, if the lithium market is so destabilized that pricing is so low and that we are not going to get the expected revenue, what will be the implications on the stake that we have, especially for the paid equities that we have as a country? Then again, my friend also talked about, in terms of profitability trend, we see that when the mining company gets to, or when the lithium prices go very high and we start experiencing a windfall, it does appear in the current agreement that there's no windfall tax, which means that if profitability goes beyond what is in the definitive feasibility studies, for example, in, let's say, 2 years or 5 years, assuming the pricing goes way beyond what even it was like 2 years ago, what are the opportunities we have built within the agreement for us to capture a windfall? So those are the things we want to draw the committee's attention to. Then the next thing is the refinery. There is a condition or some clauses that were put into the lease agreement of a refinery. But the challenge we have is that it seems there is no conditions on at what point do we say that we have to compel the company or it is mandatory for them to build a refinery, having established that the economic benefit is in its processing, not the raw export. And so there are no conditions really within the mining lease agreement that makes the processing compelling. And so those are the things we want to draw the committee's attention to. Then, by way of a policy recommendation that we want to make is that we should also start thinking about a much more broader regional critical minerals processing hub that will be hosted in Ghana, because the lithium market chemistry is changing so fast that other countries are also combining other metals that are coming up, for example, phosphate and other resources, which is abundant in Togo. Can we think going into the future, this is not particularly with this agreement, but going into the future, how do we leverage some collaborations with other countries within the sub-region?
Much for the lecture. I think you said your colleague will add something, or you have finished with that?
He is from NRGI, but there is a paper that I drew references from, so he'll do his presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Mm-hmm. So, NRGI, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Chair. As my colleague Dennis indicated, we have done some work, significant amount of work around this lithium, particularly looking at the fiscal regime and other non-fiscal.
Well, what's the full name, NRGI?
Natural Resource Governance Institute. We are a non-governmental international think tank that does research to support countries that are rich in natural resources. And yeah, we've been in Ghana for over a decade, almost 2 decades now. And so, yeah, that's it. So I wanted to draw attention to a number of key developments that will guide us in the discussion of whether to ratify this or not. Generally, the lithium as a mineral is significant in current developments and is projected to grow more than 500% up to 2050. And we are using these because we are currently experiencing what we call energy transition. We are moving away from the current systems of energy, using coal, oil, gas to produce power and to refine and put in our cars to drive, to what we call electric vehicles, wind power, and then EV batteries. And that is what is making this issue an interesting and thorny issue at the same time. And so I wanted to draw attention to that. But it's not just lithium, it is also other minerals. Like Dennis has indicated already, there are neighboring countries that are also rich in minerals that are used for these same processes. So it's not only lithium. Lithium is important for the production of EV batteries. So generally, we knew that since the 1859 or so, since the lead acid battery was discovered, we have moved away from lead acid battery because it cannot store energy for a long time, and you need a big battery to be able to fit into a small vehicle or a small operating system. Now, lithium has the capacity, it's a lighter metal that has capacity to store energy many times the normal battery that we know already in the system. And so that is what has made lithium an important source. So whether you are producing electric vehicles, it is lithium battery that will be put in that electric vehicle. If you are storing energy, even from solar, some lithium battery can be produced to store that energy from the solar panel, so that you don't have to struggle to generate energy when the sun is not shining. It can store that energy for you when the sun is not shining. And so it is important that we look at these global dynamics and situate them within the discussion. Now, is Ghana the only country that has lithium? No. In fact, the African lithium triangle sits within the SADC region, the Southern Africa region, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Namibia and DRC. In fact, the biggest producers currently, Australia, Western Australia, which produces the largest amounts of lithium, doesn't sit within Africa. And the lithium triangle, the original lithium triangle that we know, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina, sits in Latin America. And so we should be aware that we are playing in a global space that has some competition. In fact, the lithium that is wanted to evaporate and to generate the products that you need for the battery. Now, what we have is what is called the hard rock lithium. It means you have to dig the ground, you have to blast, you have to assemble, you have to crush, and you have to extract a company to invest not just in the OER project, but in other projects. And we must take note that the 12-year lease of mine that we are discussing is not fixed. If at the end of 12 years exploration, and so what you do with this current lithium mine will determine whether the company will be interested in more work around the area or not. And so we must also be mindful of that. Now, reliability of revenues. It's important that government revenue is reliable because we know we are a mining dependent country. In fact, mining revenues, oil and gas revenues are significant revenues for funding many of our development projects. And so it's important that we ensure reliability. How do you do that? We must ensure that royalty rates, which is an upfront payment, and royalty is a secured amount. Whether you make profit or not, you pay royalty. It's important that we secure that using the 10%. But in addition to securing the 10%, we must also ensure that there are variable elements. It means that we should have a royalty rate that is not fixed, but additional to the fixed 10%, we should have a royalty rate that increases as the mine profit increases and decreases as the mine profit reduces. And so that's also an important consideration. The last consideration under the fiscal terms is the simplicity. Chairman, you may recall that in the oil sector, we have what we call additional oil entitlements. And over the years, since we started producing oil, about 12 to 18 years now, we have not been able to extract that payment from any of the oil companies. We have heard of instances where additional oil entitlements have been calculated by the GRA, but have never been collected. It is because of how complex we include some of those formulas in the petroleum agreements. And we must avoid these kinds of formulas, complicated formulas, as we come into the green minerals, which lithium is the first one. And so the way to do this is to design the framework to be as simple as possible. So if profits increase by 5%, we are getting 1%, as simple as that. It could be as simple as that. If say prices of lithium increase above 1,500, we should have a percentage of royalties or a percentage of additional income that we charge on the company. That should be as simple. If we allow consultants to come in and develop very complicated formulas for us, they would leave and the GRA will not be able to use that to calculate and extract the revenue from the companies, and wanted to raise that point. Now, there were a lot of conversations that led NRGI, the Natural Resource Governance Institute, to write this paper that we are referencing today. There were a lot of conversations that we are not getting enough, that we are being cheated as a country and all of that. So what we did was to pick all the figures of the expected production, the lithium prices over time, and put it into a model that tells us how much government is going to get over the life of the mine and how much the company is going to get. And that is what has informed some of these proposals that we are making. When we did that modeling, we realized, and we did that not just for Ghana, we did it for Western Australia, we did it for Namibia, we did it for Mali, we did it for DRC. And when we did that, we realized that the government take is going to be 58%. So it means that over the life of the project, about 58% of the benefits would come to government. But now there is an interesting aspect that we need to look at. It is not just 58% coming to government, but the company's profit, what we call the internal rate of return, was over 100% actually. The company reported 94%. When we did the modeling, we got 102% of internal rate of return. It means that whilst we are getting more from this lithium mining, the company is also even getting much more in terms of profits. And so we still have an opportunity, as Dennis indicated, to change a few things in the agreement to ensure that even greater benefits come to the state. And that paper is available. We've submitted it to the committee as well, in case you want to have a look at it. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us generally that Ghana has a good geological ground, and the sort of the mining activity is not going to cost the company so much. Remember that profits come from total revenues minus costs. And so if the cost is low, you are likely to have the company reporting bigger profits. And that is what we are experiencing in this case. Even with lithium prices, in fact, what the company used to estimate the 94% was lithium prices as high as 1,500 per ton. Now, if you look at the projections of lithium prices into the future, by 2026, when the company is expected to do its first production, lithium prices will be around 976. That is what the projections show. And so even with this low lithium price, the company is still going to make substantial amounts of profit. And so there is still an opportunity for us to extract more from this. So we made a number of recommendations given all of that modeling that we did. That, as Dennis indicated, that we base the lithium pricing on a price benchmark. And it's important because the Atlantic Lithium Company has a complicated structure. Remember, it has sister companies. In fact, it owns 100% of a company sitting somewhere in Indonesia that then owns Barari. And so the ownership structure is not as straight as we always report. That Atlantic Lithium owns Barari DV, which signed the agreement. In fact, it's a complicated structure of long ownership. And there's need to ensure that these companies do not end up selling items, not just the spodumene, but also in terms of cost. They can do procurement using their sister companies that lead to inflated costs at the end of the day. And then when they deduct that inflated cost, we will get lower profit. That's what happens in most cases in the extractive industry. And so we have to ensure that we use price benchmarks. And Dennis has already listed some of them in China, in London, in India, and other places that we can just state in the agreement that we are benchmarking the lithium price to this. And so we will be monitoring how price movements are happening on that exchange that we have benchmarked it to avoid arm's length transactions, also depleting our costs. In fact, one of the points we want to make is that over 78% of the profits that, or the take that government is going to make, we said that government is going to get about 58% of the total. It means that the rest will go to the company. But over 70% of what government will get depends on how we monitor costs and items like pricing and others. And so let's not sit back and assume that the money will come. The money may not come if we don't put our eye there. We have to let our eyes be there, monitoring the cost and ensuring that GRA has the right capacity to be able to do that, including monitoring how prices are moving in the sector. And it's important to also limit the amount of interest that the mining company can deduct from taxable income, irrespective. It means that there are additional shares available. In fact, if you look at the shareholder agreement that is on the website of Atlantic Lithium, there is still over 2.5 million shares worth of shares to be bought by anybody. If a different company decides to buy those shares, what's going to happen is that it can reduce how much percentage the country holds or MIF holds, because additional people have invested. So if you are investing into a basket of revenue that is fixed, we know how much revenue will come from the mine. That amount we know. And so if you allow too many people to buy into the interest of Ghana, what you are going to do is that at the end of the period, the same amount of revenues that are available to us from lithium mining will be shared among different shareholders. And so it's important that we introduce anti-dilution measures to ensure that the interest of the state is not diluted. It means that what we have, if we have 10%, it means that it is 10%. It won't change over the life of the mine. And so it's important to ensure that that happens. The other point we need to make is to establish the rules in the shareholder agreement. Remember, MIF is now a shareholder, and so we have a seat there. And so we need to establish clear rules in the shareholders agreement to reduce the risk of underpayment of dividends to the state. It's similar to the share issue that I was talking about. If we don't include those, we don't ensure that that shareholder agreement is available to us as a committee. Honorable Chair, I would plead that you see the shareholder agreement between ASO, Piedmont, and MIF to ensure that those rules are included in how much dividend will be paid to MIF before we approve this transaction. Continuing to build the capacity of GRA is a point I've already made, and I will not belabor it. Now, we know, as Dennis indicated, that there's going to be a feasibility study. In fact, there has been a scoping study, and Nananum have indicated that they were consulted in the process of that scoping study. But what we don't know is that that scoping study has not been made public. And so those of us who are doing analysis around this lithium could have benefited from the findings in that scoping study. We don't know it. And so it's important that that scoping study is made available to the committee so that you would be able to tell how feasible it is to add value or not, whether a refinery will happen or not, and if government decides to give any concessions like a tax holiday or even reduce electricity prices, as we were hearing some time ago. That will all be factored into the feasibility study and the scoping study. And so it's important that the feasibility study report and the scoping study reports are all published and furnished to the committee and also made public to the general populace. We are saying that considering the measures at increasing the prospects of lithium refinery in Ghana, it is important that that feasibility study involves the country as a whole, not just the company doing its own feasibility. We need to get involved and know what to do. Noted, Mr. Chairman. Now, after discussing those fiscal elements, I'll just touch on two things to conclude. The issue of transparency, we think that the disclosure of the lithium contract has led to heated discussions, which is positive for this contract. Now, we know that there's another contract that has accompanied the lithium contract, but that was not disclosed. And so institutions like us who could have done an analysis and presented the findings to the committee are unable to do that because the Lithium and Bauxite agreement was not available at the time we were discussing this. But it's positive to note that Parliament has ensured that this is disclosed. And so when we saw the advert in the graphic on the 14th of August, that Parliament was inviting us and indicated that the agreement was public. We went to look at it, but unfortunately the time is limited for us to do a proper analysis of the bauxite agreement like we've done with this. But we encourage this disclosure to continue. We also encourage...
It's because the bauxite agreement, and it's not the first of its kind. We passed one about 2 months ago. Okay. And this is the second one. So it's like we think you know everything about that agreement. That's why maybe that one is on your blind side. But if you are concentrating on the lithium, which we are mining for the first time, I think you can make a point there.
Noted, Chair. That's positive. Unfortunately, that slipped and we couldn't get hold of it. But we just thought that we should congratulate Parliament for holding this consultation session. It's part of the drive for transparency that we have advocated for over the many years. And we think that most agreements should go through processes like this to enhance the value that the state will get from this. The last point to make here is around the environment sustainability issues and the issue of community development agreements that Nana spoke about. Honorable Chair, you know that in the mining sector, different mechanisms are used to compensate communities. Some do corporate social spending, others have a 1% community fund, which is not in any agreement. It is voluntary. I mean, that's the point to make. Almost all the interventions that mining companies make are voluntary. For the first time, we are having a deduction that is ingrained in law or in an agreement. And it's important that we take advantage of this opportunity to streamline all the community development agreements across all the mining areas in this country. It's important. In fact, if you wouldn't mind, I will make reference to the community development agreement guidelines in Sierra Leone. They have a comprehensive system, and we plan to do some work around this to guide how government can institute a community development guidelines that guide operations of mining in almost all mining communities. But we must also note that the process of mining, unlike gold, which can be done underground, whilst you probably still have your building on top, the process of mining lithium is a surface mine. What it means is that there's going to be a lot of dust, a lot of environmental impact, a lot of blasting, a lot of impact on farming that we have already heard Nananom speak so much about that I will not want to belabor. And so it is important that the process of undertaking environmental and social impact assessments are done differently from what we do with the mining sector. And I encourage the committee to probably pay attention to that report as well as you consider to review this and to ensure that the communities benefit at the end of the day. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. Finally, we take from... Is it Mazda? Are you here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are here.
Oh, okay, so please, your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everybody. Let me add my voice in commending the committee and by extension Parliament for this novel exercise. It's been the practice that each time leases as important as this are going to be passed, usually it is left to the committee to do the determination of what is right for the state and the rest of it. But this time around, the committee decided to seek input from the public, and I think this is something we need to commend going forward. Having said that, I think that, like it's been said, the bauxite agreement was not very public, so it was difficult having access to the document. So on our part, we were also unable to do any comprehensive or exhaustive study of the agreement. We got it when the announcement was made. Nonetheless, whatever concerns we have, I think, could easily find expression in the bauxite agreement as well, because these elements together constitute critical or green minerals. And our argument is that there's a shift. In fact, there's a global effort towards decarbonization, and that requires moving away from doing the things we are used to doing. Now there's a transition towards green or low carbon technologies, and that involves the use of elements like lithium, bauxite, manganese, cobalt, which thankfully Ghana is blessed with. So our view is that these are, even though they are not new elements, but these are elements demand for which has risen exponentially over the period. That places them in a different, if you wish, league in today's conversation when it comes to natural resources. And for us, given that Ghana profits a great deal from oil and gas, if there is going to be that green transition, what that presupposes is that government is going to be losing a great deal of revenue that we hitherto were getting from oil and gas. So this gives us an opportunity to have, to take a sit back and tell ourselves what is it that we need to do so we can optimize our gains from this, from these new elements that have become the talk of the world. So for us, we think that lithium and allied minerals should be treated in the same manner as we treated oil when we discovered it. That would mean that any agreement we are going to sign is going to be a pioneer agreement, and that would be a guide for subsequent agreements. It is to that extent that we feel that there are some concerns with the present agreement, and our advocacy is that in this present state, and I'm referring to the lithium agreement, in this present state, should not be ratified until some of these concerns are dealt with, so that going forward, Ghana can say that we got the revenue, we got the profits, we got the benefits that we needed to get from these elements in a more sustainable fashion. First, it is pointless belaboring the fact that the demand for lithium and other green minerals is on the rise. The projection is that by 2030, demand for lithium batteries is going to rise from its 22 level of 700 gigawatt hours to 4,700 gigawatt hours in 2030. And the demand for lithium itself is going to increase exponentially in the next few years. Even though prices of these elements are volatile, but it is typical of a lot of these commodities. Prices tend to be volatile. That does not take away the fact that demand for it is still going to increase. Prices may fall and rise, but nonetheless, demand is going to be at an all-time high because of that desire by countries to transition to green technologies. Now, our concerns, specifically with the present agreement, are that, for example, when the fiscal regime, you take the royalty rate, and we are told that this is the best that we have ever had. The truth is that in 2015, we amended the Minerals and Mining Act to allow for an increase in the royalty rate. Unfortunately, the minister or whoever was supposed to operationalize this amendment has since not given us an opportunity to have higher royalty rate. The amendment was to the effect that the minister needs to determine, because the 5% fixed royalty rate, which we had set in 2010 due to an amendment, Act 794, we felt 5% was not enough. We needed to get as much as we could from our minerals. So that amendment was occasioned. Nevertheless, nothing was done beyond the 5%. So all subsequent agreements after the amendment the royalty rate stayed at 5%. So if we are saying this is the first time this is happening, I just think that it is the first time we are operationalizing the amendment, not because there was no such provision. There was a provision. It is not founded in law. The 10% as set in the agreement is not founded in law, in the sense that 10% is discretionary. One would say it is due to the negotiation ability of the minister. That's how come he got the 10%. But in subsequent leases, it is possible that the minister, whoever he may be, would not be able to negotiate the 10% royalty rate. But when we did the amendment, Section 25 of the Act, we envisaged that it is possible to have such a scenario whereby the minister will negotiate an increase, another minister will negotiate a different increase, and so on, or even a decrease. So a kind of dilemma would have arisen. But the amendment went further to make provision that would cure such a dilemma. So there was an introduction of a subsection U under Section 110 that entitles the minister to introduce a legislation or an LI, a legislative instrument, to make regulations that will allow him to set the royalty rate. Now, our argument is that if we do not set the set royalty rate, if it's not founded in any law, it is possible that we can have different lease agreements with different royalty rates. So we need to have the minister introduce a legislative instrument making the regulations. If we all agree as a country that 10% is the royalty rate we think we should get from lithium and other critical minerals, let it be so, and let that legislative instrument reflect that. But if you do not have the legislative instrument which empowers you to set the rate, and we just say, oh, the minister was able to negotiate 10%. What if the next minister comes in and is unable to do that? What happens? So our argument is that do the needful first before we proceed to have such an agreement. We are not in a haste to exploit our lithium. In fact, a country like Chile, after 1974, they have agreed not to give out any new concessions to anybody to exploit lithium. All pre-74 concessions are allowed to run their lifespans, but beyond that, they have refused to give new leases because they know the importance of this. So my point is that we need to hasten slowly. It's not, of course, we need revenue from our minerals and the rest of it, but let's do it in a way that at the end of the day, we can all say we have profited a great deal from that. So our argument is that precede this agreement with the necessary legislative instrument that would entitle you to make the regulations. What if you get another company or entity that says, we will not give you the 3% unless you pay for it? It means government has to pay if it wants the 13%. But if we feel 13% is what we should have by way of, free carried interest, we can amend the law to make it mandatory that from the 10%, we are moving it to 13% now. But as it stands, the prevailing legislation says it should be 10%, and the government can only negotiate further if it wants to. I mean, given the terms between the two entities, that's government and then the company. So if the entity says, well, for the 3% extra, you have to pay for it, it means government is not having 13%. So, and this being the pioneer agreement, our argument is that it has to be about the best, reflect in the law, so that you don't have variable lease agreements with different companies depending on which entity is willing to give you the free or which one is asking you to pay for it. The other alternative is to have an entirely new fiscal and regulatory framework or regime. When we discovered oil, we decided that this is a new discovery. So we came up with a Revenue Management Act that governs how revenues are shared and how revenues are received. We could have a similar arrangement with respect to lithium and other critical minerals. I feel that we should not focus too much only on lithium, because there are other critical minerals that are in high need as far as the drive towards green transition goes. So we can maximize our gains from these critical minerals by having a fiscal regime that allows us to make the most out of these minerals. So our suggestion is, why don't we have an entirely new fiscal regime that says that, look, bauxite, manganese, cobalt, and lithium, if it is about royalty, this is how all these are going to operate. As it stands now, bauxite operates, even though the law says the minister should set the royalty rate, but it's still charged at 5% and the rest of it. We cannot continue to run our critical minerals like this. And the other issue is that we should also have an arrangement, a fiscal arrangement, whereby processed lithium, because lithium in its raw form is valuable, but not as valuable as it would be if you were to process it. So the value of lithium is found in its processing. Now, the agreement says there has to be a refinery. Now, the question I'm asking is, processed lithium, what is the fiscal regime around processed lithium? This agreement is about the spodumene. It does not talk about processed lithium, and that is where the money is. So we should have a fiscal and regulatory regime that says that, look, when it comes to spodumene, this is how much royalty you are entitled to. Once it is processed, the terms must change. And this is what you are entitled to. When you process it, this is what you are entitled to. At the end of the day, government of Ghana, once we begin to lose our revenues from oil and gas, we can have something to rely on, and we can say that even though we lost oil, but there was a replacement, and we continue to optimize our gains from these minerals. So our recommendation is that until these are done, a hasty passage or approval of any such agreement will not be in the best interest of this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
So you call it a hasty?
I'm saying any. I didn't say this is. You've not approved it yet, so I'm assuming.
Put off your mic, please.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. You now take some questions, and then you give the answers. We start from leader. Leader, you okay? Next.
You see, I've been listening intently to the concerns of the think tanks, especially. This is necessary for us to have some of these undertakings because of how it's going to benefit the community. I do not believe that sometimes the environment of the discussion is right. That if all the factors are good, then we don't need investors. If all the factors are good, then we should do our mining ourselves. There's no need to worry your soul about an investor coming to rip you off or the kind of ideas about what the investors will do. But when we talk about people who risk capital and people who have the financial muscle to come and do what we cannot do. For example, it has been said that the Geological Survey Department should be able to, if you like, x-ray all the minerals in Ghana. The cost of that, if they should inform you, will be more than what we are asking the IMF to give us. It's not easy. But when you get an investor and then you believe that, in the name of nationalism, you don't want to look at, returns on investment and the rest of it, then the imbalance is worrying. But that's a discussion for another day. But I was a bit concerned about legislating an agreement that could be a total put-off. Who is this, with the greatest of respect, investor who believes that, let us dilute the shares, and the government of Ghana will be clapping for that investor without me saying that what you are doing, you want to dilute the shares. Every government with a modicum of common sense will rise up to the occasion. Because when we are doing the contract, it's not the book. Not every issue will be captured in the contract. But when we are being given a shabby treatment, the regulators are there. Now what we are trying to do to the nation is a pure rip-off. So these are some of the matters that I think we should bear in mind, that we will not be able to have all the issues in the contract. What I'll finally say is that with the greatest of benefit will never surface, because financially we will not be unable to do it, and people should have to take risk so that they win some and you also win some. That is what the whole world is doing now. So this is my little understanding of all that's going on. But some of these matters will be on the House floor for us to look at.
It's not a question, so you continue.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I am surprised that our friends from the other side are not here to engage further with our chiefs and our petitioners, because this is a very important and fruitful exercise, and I would have wished they were here with us for us to have a fruitful conversation with our chiefs and petitioners. I also want to commend Nananom. I have with me here a summary report of the stakeholders' engagement with the traditional leaders. And having listened to Nana Omanhin of Mankasim and Yinahini, and if you permit me, let me just read a portion of what Nana stated at one of the stakeholders' engagements. Omanhin of Mankasim traditional area, Osajefo Amanfu Edu the fourth, also delivered a statement urging stakeholders to lend their support to the ELP of Atlantic Lithium Limited within their communities, drawing on his past experience as a social relations and community manager at prominent mining company. So having listened to Nana, I realized that Nana has a past experience in the mining sector. And he rightly alluded to the fact that the Honorable Minister has done a great job there's a big improvement in the royalties, having moved away from the 5% industry norm to about 10%. And he also alluded to the fact that the 13% fee carried interest is above the normal 10%. When Nana Nyinahini was also speaking, he spoke about job creation, he spoke about economic growth, he spoke about infrastructure. So I believe Nananom and the good people of Ghana, having done an extensive engagement with all those who matter, we have taken a good decision that will benefit all of us. And they are hoping that Parliament will do due diligence and pass or rectify this list as soon as possible, so that the good people of Ghana would benefit from this lithium agreement. Having listened to IEA and Imani and RIGI, Imani spoke about local value addition, and the IEA spoke about lease in line with the Minerals Act. I believe will not go contrary to that. And NRGI also spoke about price benchmark. To conclude, I want to draw the attention that we've taken all that in good faith. There's going to be an industrial growth. There's going to be construction of a lithium refinery plant. I believe you are very much aware. And there are also going to be other benefits that some of our byproducts will be used for ceramics industries and all that. So definitely there's going to be a value-added policy and no raw lithium export. Only refined products will be exported. So we'll do due diligence. The good people of Ghana are listening to us. And as members of Parliament, we also have diverse experience. That's why some of us are on this committee. And we are working with our technical team. And I believe that having listened to the Imanis and and my good friend Atik, I listened to you on Peace FM this morning. You spoke at length about today's meeting. I believe we've had some extensive engagement with technical people who are associated with this list. And we'll do justice to this list to ensure that the good people of Ghana benefits from the lithium and the bauxite. And Nananom and the good people of Nyinahini and Mankesim also benefit, because they are waiting seriously for this list to be rectified so that we can all enjoy the benefits that are associated with the mining list. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Frida. Next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, having listened to all the presentation, I don't think none of the presenters have any issue about the agreements. The only thing some of them are suggesting that we should modify some has been abandoned or has been ceased not to work. And it's actually affecting the economic activities in that particular area. So for me, yes, we need to actually modify some section of the agreement, but that doesn't prevent Parliament to approve it and allow the investor to actually work and actually help the people in that community. So, Chairman, like Frida said, I'm shocked that our colleagues, we met them and they said they are coming. And looking at this attitude, it will not help Ghana. Like Nana said, this is not NDC, this is not MPP. We are all here for Parliament. Once you have been voted, you have voted to come and work and serve the people of Ghana. And if none of them are here and we ignore them, I don't think it's the best interest of Parliament. So, Chairman, that's my few comments.
Brilliant. Next.
Chairman, thank you. It is just to impress upon what my leader has said. I think looking at the agreement, none of the speakers, I think, in their presentation is against it, as it has been established earlier. But they are requesting of some few modifications, of which I think leadership of the committee would adhere to their core. And looking at the economic developments, I think this is what the good people of Ghana sought to see from any government. And I think with this agreement as presented.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to add my voice to numerous concerns that have been raised here. There are a lot that I've been hearing, and I was of the view that maybe when we do the community engagement, there may be dissenting views. But if you look at whatever is happening now, it seems that there are some few things that our technical and the experts are saying that we should put in. And I think that we have to try and address the misinformation that people try to carry it out. Because if you look at whatever Nananum are saying, there is no indication that the mining, they are against it. And the same thing, if you look at what the think tanks are also bringing out, they are expecting that we should put in certain things which they do. There is a lot of transparency so far as this agreement is concerned. Unless maybe there is something that I didn't hear, but if you look at whatever is happening now, it shows that the communication is out there. We are bringing all inputs so that we know how we are going to handle these issues. In fact, I believe that one of the major things that was also mentioned, farming. But I believe that whatever we are doing, we are not mining gold in my area. We have not. So as at now, please, as at now. So whatever we are doing now, my interest is that one day it will benefit the whole community, and my people can even come to maybe Nyinahina or any other place to get a job. And I think that is going to help us. So if what we are doing is clear and transparency, then I will employ everybody to get on board so that we help not only the contractor, as my leader said, the investor, but we help the community where God has blessed them with that natural resources so that we can get the best for the country. That's the little I will say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you too for your contribution. I now come to Aziz.
Chairman, thank you so much. And I also like to add my voice to thank the stakeholders for taking this matter seriously. I think when we first met and the committee agreed we should try to extend our engagement to other stakeholders. I mean, it was a unanimous decision. So like the Deputy Chief Whip said, another issue for another day. And I'm equally surprised Mr. Atik is saying that the committee should hasten slowly. I mean, Nananu mentioned that this thing started in 2013. We're talking of 11 years. And over 500 structures are being affected. 2,000 farmers are affected. 2,000 acres of land is currently just, not put to use economically. It means that this is a matter that Parliament must take seriously, and we must do whatever we can. Like the Chief rightly said, if Parliament really wants to ratify this, we should do it as soon as possible. If Parliament wants not to do it, then we should let them know. Then they put their land into use, or those structures that have been abandoned can be put back to use. And listening to all of them, like every member said, we have come to realize that nobody has an objection, outright objection to this lease agreement. The only thing is that we need to do certain adjustment. And I'm so happy that Imani also mentioned that there must be, there's no price benchmarking. This is an important issue that we need to look at. It's really IE. From where I sit, I don't think there should be a problem with it. Then if you talk of my brother after the presenter after Imani, he equally mentioned that the tax rate in this lease agreement is the highest in the sub-region, right? So, definitely this shows that there is progress. It's not like just the usual thing that normally happens in this country. So, Mr. Chairman, with these few words, I just hand over to you or any other member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, my Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. The earlier speaker, is it Atiko? What is his name? The first speaker. He said something about this contract being a concessionary agreement. Please, I stand for correction. You are demanding a carried interest of 13% you have a royalty of 10%, you have 6% additional carry interest, that's to MIF. So when you see the structure of this agreement, this is a hybrid. This is not purely concessionary agreement. And I stand for correction. And again, when it comes to the extractive industry, there should be a tax distortion because of the cost involved in extractive industry for the investor also to benefit. So I think, Mr. Chairman, per the agreement we have with us, I think to me it's one of the best. Thank you.
You want to answer something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Nana, let him finish, then I will let you come in.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. It appears the impression is being created that, well, I am of the view that this is a good agreement and that I just need some modifications. That's the impression that I get from the company, because there are some fundamental blocks that ought to be built or laid before we can then proceed to talk about having a lease agreement. In the absence of that, this lease agreement is problematic. So I just wanted to state that on record, that it is not our position that this is...
Thank you very much. That's your point. We take it. Yeah, Nana.
Well, I want to add something to some aspects on the closure of the mine. And the aspect of reclamation and rehabilitation. Very often, in fact, like one member said, I was actually the community safety and environment manager at Golden Star, Bogoso, the first surface mining in Ghana. The problem we have with that is the regulators who are to ensure these things are done. Quite recently, I read a publication by Dr. Steve Matthew, saying that he even tackled the Minerals Commission, that they are not able to perform their functions well because of their numbers. It's also similar with the EPA. The environmental degradation and non-compliance to the rehabilitation and reclamation processes. But let me give one example. It's part of the LI 1652, that's the environmental regulations. It's mandatory they prepare a document called Environmental Management Plan. And once you do it, you follow it to make sure that all the pits and disturbed lands are well reclaimed and the relevant regulators, they will come. So I think I would recommend if this aspect could be taken seriously in the agreement, the formation of an effective local monitoring committee, environmental monitoring committee, who will regularly be feeding the EPA and the Minerals Commission with all issues that maybe go contrary to those specified in the EIS. So that is what I would want to add. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to agree with your colleague on the left-hand side.
Vice Chairman.
Vice Chairman, sorry. The Vice Chairman. Yeah, that, I recognize that it's a hybrid in the sense that it combines both royalty, tax, and then some sharing of the product. But I am talking about, pure, production sharing kind of agreement. We don't have the capital, we don't have the expertise, but we need to build it from today. Otherwise we'll continue to give away the entire product to foreign companies.
Your earlier presentation, you mentioned that, so we are okay with that. Now, leader, Mr.
Chairman, thank you. And I think we should also express profound appreciation to our chiefs and the other members from various think tanks who have expressed opinions about the agreements before us. But I think that my own observation from this encounter is that first, we'll agree that we should be mining the minerals. So that's the first thing. We all agree. I think we also all agree that the mineral that we are dealing falls in the basket of a very fast evolving technology. We must be clear in our minds that if we don't take action, we may experience stranded assets in not too distant a future. As far as lithium is concerned, we should not think that it's an eternal resource. If we are not careful, it may fall in the category of stranded assets. That is not to say that we should not approach it with some degree of caution. And I think that the issue that I'm garnering from what contributions that have come from think tanks is that we should be cautious and be able to extract optimum benefits for the country. Ideally, as my senior, Dr. Kwache, has indicated, the state should be doing thanks. The state should be, if we have the muscle and the technology, be doing the extraction and the processing. But let's admit to ourselves, we know the track record of our state enterprises in this country. Let's not kid ourselves. We know. Even now, what we have in the system, with electricity, with Ghana Water, with the telephony, and so on, we all do know. So to go back to the ideas existing in the Old Testament, we should agree that there's a New Testament, and is reinforced by your own constitution, which indicates to us that the private enterprise should be the lead anchor for our national development. What we need to do in attending to this is that we must maybe take some decision. But the decision that we take, propelled by this agreement, should be informed. And what we are having from the stakeholders, to me, is very, very important. The think tank, what they are throwing up, really should engage our attention in really assessing the agreement. Yes, a refinery to be done, the state interest to be protected. How do we assure ourselves, even when it comes to mining, that we are sure of the quantity that is mined and the quality that is mined? How do we assure ourselves? I do recollect that on the eve of the commissioning of the FPSO, the current deputy minority leader, the Honorable Amabua, was the deputy minister for energy, and we went on the facility together. And I asked some questions then about the capacity of GRA to monitor the flow meter. Oh, we are short. I also even spoke about the integrity of the flow meter and whether we had backup. The assurance was given. Not too long after the commissioning, we also saw what happened. And eventually we had to use dipsticks. So how do we assure ourselves as a nation
that we are not being shortchanged. That should be our paramount concern. We're talking about the refinery, and it's going to take bold decisions. For one, we should admit that the price, and I think one of 6 cents per kilowatt hour, it will not be profitable. So where do we go? Is it the case that perhaps when we come to that, we may have to dedicate perhaps a turbine from Akosombo to do that for us, together with the bauxite? Because other than that, it's not going to be profitable a venture to do it, because they also deter the investors. And I take a cue from some of the issues that have been raised by presenters from Imani, from Atik. And as I said, my senior, Dr. Kwachi, I think when I got to Form 1, he was in Form 5 or something. Agreement, or the best agreement for the country. But to state that, Atik, I think you expressed a concern that we should have an ally. Unfortunately, you should have the agreement. The agreement will yield a legislative instrument. It's not the other way around. So we have to work on that, because you want an improvement in the regime, and all of us are concerned. How do we best achieve that? I think we all have to put our heads together to see what to do with it. And as you said, the ensuring the non-dilution, establishing clear rules in shareholder agreements, and building the capacity of GRA. I think we've gotten all these things. And when we recline, there are matters that we have to delve into. Because at the end of the day, we must protect the interests of the state. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that it's for a good cause that we've met them, and the issues they've raised, as far as I'm concerned, very noteworthy. We should recline to consider them and factor them into the agreement to improve it, so that not only the localites, but the country as a whole will stand to benefit, and the interests of the investor would also be protected. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, our former leader. Now we listen to the Deputy Minister, and then I will wind up.
Chairman, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, 500, possibly going down. So it is also for us to also be looking at that, so that we do not ward off people. We are all glad, and we are all into it to make sure that at the end of the day, we get jobs for our people. From the extraction to the refinery, all of those would increase the amount of jobs that we are going to get. And we have that. But the refinery would also have to come with something, the mass of production that we can get out of it. We must be looking across countries that have much more deposit of this that we have, and what has happened to them. Even with those production, have they been able to set up refineries? It's important, whilst we look at all of these things, we must be very, very careful. Otherwise, just as some minerals have been termed as whatever, stranded assets and the rest, and you can talk about asbestos, we probably may end up having why such engagements are important, to inform us as to what we are doing and the necessary ways for us to move forward. We at the ministry are well informed about this, with our agencies, department, and parliament as a whole, to give consideration to all of these things. But whilst we also leave the table, we must also know that not all our thoughts, thinking, and desires can necessarily be materialized and be possible in the immediate, but be carried on from now, going forward, feeding into other things that we do. Just the same way that this agreement can be said to be outstanding from others that we may have had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. All too soon, we have to end this stakeholder engagement. Nananom, we are very grateful for your time, your contribution, and the knowledge you have shared with us. We are very grateful. And then our think tanks too, we are so glad you have come here to tell us your mind and giving us some samples of such mining happening in other countries for us to also learn. We promise that the committee will sit again after you leave and then we come out with, I don't know whether to say our verdict of the whole thing. And then we'll make sure Nananom will also smile, because